Hey, welcome. I guess the webinar has now started. I think we're going to let people in a minute. We were just talking about keyword research, so we'll just continue that conversation. And one of the things that we're finding more and more, and I know Arsen has some thoughts on this, is that we're finding a lot of people are continuing to target keywords that they have no chance of ranking for. And they're good and bad to that. I mean,
the other way. Right.
Well,
right.
Yeah, they're targeting keywords that
are not going to yield much traffic, right?
Have no volume or very, because maybe they're using domain authority. We'll talk about that in a minute again.
Right.
But we don't want to pigeonhole you too much. It's amazing how you will rank for something in, say, just 6 months or a year if you've built up the authority to your blog. So we don't want to pigeonhole you too much. I know there's a lot of courses out there that are like, oh my God, never go after this keyword because it's it's too competitive and your DA is not going to line up with it and you have no chance of ranking for it. But if you do that 100% of the time, you're going to find that the keywords that you are targeting are going to be so low volume and competition that you're not going to generate a ton of traffic. So we're going to literally have to publish 300 posts just to get you to the level of where 100 posts with decent keyword research would have gotten
maybe
you
even
6
less
months or a year ago. Yeah.
Right. And this kind of also goes into this whole link building conversation that we're going to be having
today. We're going to talk about that today.
Right. Because if you're already going to invest, you already invest the time into creating the content, shooting the recipe, writing the recipe, video in the recipe, like everything. And the recipe doesn't have much volume, like you already invest the time into not much return. And then when you're going to start promoting and amplifying that recipe, a part of that process is link building. And is it worth that additional investment if the demand for that content is just not present?
Yeah. For those of you who came on late, again, don't even worry about this. This is a conversation we were having behind the scenes. We've been seeing more and more bloggers who are coming to us. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. I took a keyword course and the keyword course told me to target this kind of keyword. And the problem is the keyword course was a little bit too restrictive and it was making you target keywords that honestly you could rank for, but they literally had no volume and you were basically proverbially spinning your wheels. And so we want to understand that just because you don't think you can rank for something now doesn't mean that you won't rank for that in 6 months or a year. And that's what we really want to mix in the competitiveness of those keywords and understand topics. And we're not going to talk a lot about keyword research today. We had a whole webinar on that, and I'm going to put Ashley on the spot. And she's going to paste that into the notes so that you guys can catch up on that. Just understand that there is no hard and fast rule. Whenever someone tells you, okay, your domain authority is this, and therefore you should only be targeting this type of keyword, that's a generality. It's never going to work in 10 out of 10 cases. And I certainly do not want you to hitch your wagon on that kind of strategy, because you can and will rank for a lot of keywords that on the surface that you might not have thought at all that you had any chance of ranking for. So we just don't want to pigeonhole you from the start. We're seeing a lot of bloggers coming to us saying,
Casey has said pigeonhole like 7 times already.
Pigeonhole 7 times, 6 times.
In the 3 minutes that we've been on.
Every time you pigeonhole yourself, you have to take a drink. Yeah.
We have a t-shirt.
Definitely going to get a pigeon pillow.
We don't want to pigeonhole you.
Yeah, pigeonhole you.
Hashtag SEO for bloggers.
SEO for bloggers, done. But anyway, good times.
Yeah, so for those who joined a little bit late and heard conversations happening about keyword research, have no fear. The recording, people have been asking, we will publish the recording of this a week later in the recap blog post, as always. So if you felt the need to get the beginning of the keyword research conversation they were talking about, you will hear it. We'll make sure and publish the full thing. But let's talk about backlinks. That's what we're here for. Let's talk about link building. Let's talk about how to build backlinks. As always, we're going to do Q&A at the very end of the webinar. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A button. Make sure and press that button and it'll pop up a lovely Q&A box. Inside that box is where you can put your question and you can expect an answer. If you put your question in the chat box, which is in the webinar box, most likely it may get skipped. If we don't get to answer all of the questions in the Q&A section, which rarely ever happens that we can get to all of them in the webinar, the panelists take the time throughout the week to actually go in and physically answer every single question that's in the Q&A. So summary, put your question in the Q&A, not in the chat box, and it will for sure get answered. And the blog post recap will be published in a week. Lots of housekeeping things, but let's talk about backlinks. Let's
do it.
You guys submitted such great questions about how to gain new backlinks, backlink building, but I really want to take it to the basics first and then get into the advanced stuff. So Andrew, can you just start us off by explaining a real simple explanation of what backlinks are and why they're important?
Sure. So Backlinks are just links to your own site from somebody else's site. That's it. It's not super fancy, but this is how the internet works, right? Everybody links to everybody else. That's why it's called the internet. So the thing that made Google so brilliant early on, in the 90s, was that they figured out that links are really important. It's like a vote from one site. If you link to another site, you're saying, hey, this site is worthy. I want to link to this site for some reason. And so they factored that into their algorithm, and they said, hey, we're going to do this crazy mathematical computation to figure out, hey, the more links you have, the more important your site is, and we're going to give you more ranking. In the 90s, it was very simplistic. It's gotten infinitely more sophisticated now, but it still holds true. Links are really important because they're really hard to fake. They're hard to fake properly. Google can detect, I see Arson shaking his head, but Google can detect, or works very hard to detect, if you're trying to game the system. And so when you have a natural backlink profile, it looks really good, and it says, hey, this site is worthy, so we're going to lift you up in the search results.
I'm going to quickly chime in.
Oh, sure.
So think of links, especially for bloggers, right? So there's different verticals and how links affect them, especially for bloggers. Think of links. I'm looking at Casey's cat. Good profile shot. Think of links as secondary signals from other sites. Think of them as third-party validation. Other sites on the web saying when they link to you, they're essentially telling Google that the page that I'm linking, the document that I'm linking to, is indeed a valuable resource on the topic that it's covering, right? There's much more involved in that, but think of links that way. And the more of that you have coming to you from relevant sites, so like you don't want a transmission repair web shot in Fresno, California, linking to your Ukrainian borscht post, right? But maybe a mom blog that has a section on her site about cooking for her kids, linking to you, that makes sense. That relevancy signal is so important. So they're secondary signals. Your content is still the primary driving factor. They're secondary signals, and they're third-party validation. The more of those you have, the more chances you have at hitting top of page one positions.
And I would just add to that, one of the themes that you're going to see today, folks, on the call is that our goal here is to show you that, and this is what Google is looking for. We want you to be a content creator who happens to get links rather than a link builder who happens to create content. And once you make that shift, you're going to find that it's a lot easier to build in links or to generate these, authoritative mentions to your site on the interwebs. And that's kind of our goal today, to show you some strategies that'll work and provide some targets that you can go after.
And you can't really talk about backlinks. I mean, you guys gave such a great explanation of the depth of backlinks, but you really can't talk about backlinks without clarifying what a high authority website means. Casey, what exactly deems a high authority website? And does it really matter when all these SEO tools claim things like domain authority as metrics? Does that have to do with the authoritativeness? Like, can you kind of dive into that and explain that?
Sure. So a high authority website is simply a trusted source of reliable information for users. That's the simplest way to say it. It's a site that offers clear, increased UX. It has a strong trust and engagement signals. It tends to have a lot of earned links from outside sites that are relevant and viewed as authoritative themselves. What we're trying to do is that if we're looking at a backlink profile, whether Google's doing it programmatically or algorithmically or whatever, they're looking at clusters. They're looking at to see kind of seed units. What is linking into the site? Where are those links coming from? Do they represent a specific niche or a specific topical focus? And then they determine, based upon an extremely complicated algorithm that we will not get into today, whether or not those links are trustworthy. But our goal here today is really to kind of understand that any site, especially all of you on the call today, can have a high authority website. It's really all just a matter of you getting other sites that are niche related to link to you, or getting local sites that will feature you to link to you. Think of it as a competition for prom king and queen. It's not so much, it used to be that, again, the site, whoever had the most votes won. Not necessarily so much these days. with Prom, Queen, and King. It's really about the quality of the sites that are linking to you and the quality of the votes. And that's what we're going to kind of focus on today specifically. Now, as Ashley mentioned, we've always heard about the concept of domain authority. The concept of domain authority is an invented metric. It was invented by Moz years ago. Many of you are familiar with Moz. It is a metric that Google does not use. They've come out and specifically said this on a handful of occasions. But it is a metric that we kind of have to pay attention to because it's good for comparison metric purposes. It allows us to kind of see very quickly how we might stack up to another site. If I have an audit with a site who's a domain authority 19, and I look at their backlinks and I see that they only have about 200 linking root domains, and yet they're trying to steal links from another site that might be a domain authority 38 with 700 or 900 linking root domains, and it's going to be very hard for them to compete on shared keywords unless we can get their own internal authority up. And so what we're trying to do is, understand that I know it's a little bit of a, I can't even think of the word I'm using, arson, but it's kind of a conundrum in that Google doesn't use domain authority, but nevertheless, domain authority is an interesting metric in comparison purposes because we know, and we can get you to the next tier of domain authority, it is substantially easier for a site to rank for very specific queries. Now, there is a lot of similar metrics out there, whether you're using SEMrush or using Ahrefs or Majestic, all have similar authority and domain level strength metrics that they use across their own data. But I just want all of you to understand on the call two things. Number one, this is not something that Google uses that they say repeatedly. And number two, it should be used as a comparison metric only so that you can both determine where you stack up right now and also compare side by side possible link targets for competition data.
I do just want to know, it looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties on our side. So if you put out questions into the chat or conversations in the chat, the panelists aren't actually able to chat. So I'll be relaying everything. So there may be
yeah, see that.
if there's any conversations in there. Excuse me. Arsen, when it comes to backlinks, and Casey just briefly started touching on this, but is it more important to have a larger number of backlinks pointing to a blog or have less backlinks, but backlinks from higher authority websites?
Who's answering that? Arsen?
Do you want to take it?
No, absolutely. Let's have Arsen do it.
The answer is it depends.
Interesting.
Really, that's interesting. Really, tell us more.
Right.
Tell us more.
It depends on. If you're a natural backlink profile will consist of a little bit of everything, right? It will consist of good quality links, poor quality links, follow links, no follow links, image links, naked, it's going to be scattered. There's going to be no rhyme or reason. And Google over the years has become much better at sifting through the crap and ignoring it. And this is also why, and I think we're touching on this later also, this is also why we haven't had to do a backlink penalty cleanup in a good amount of time. I'm looking like 4 or 5 years now. We haven't had like a penalty recovery client. So Google is becoming much better at sifting through the trash. And so there really doesn't, would I go out there and invest time into building trash links? Probably not, right? I'm going to chase, and when we say authority, we're not talking about domain authority. We're talking about quality, right? We're talking about topical authority. We're talking about quality of the site, we're not talking about domain authority. So would I invest my time into chasing authoritative links? Yes, absolutely. Do you need a lot of them? It depends. Certain queries, you definitely do. For certain things, you definitely do need links. If you're competing and you're seeing that page 1 is very much filled with sites that have topical authority, like WebMD has topical authority and everything medical. All Recipe has topical authority and everything that's food, right? If you see that page 1 is filled with that, you will most likely have a hard time ranking on page 1 without links, right? And for other queries, not so much. So it depends. It depends a lot of factors. A good, healthy backlink profile will definitely have a variety of everything. So definitely have a lot of links and have a variety of all kinds of types of links.
Yeah, and Ashley, I don't think we put this on there. Maybe it was part of the question. I didn't get to it about how to build up your domain authority. Is that something that we had on the list, or is that something we could just interject now?
Yeah, and that's also echoing a little bit of some of the questions that's going into the Q&A. So it would be
okay. So when we talk about building up domain authority, Arson touched on it very quickly there about the quality over the quantity. We want to prioritize relevant backlinks whenever possible. Clearly, if you're a recipe site, I would want to prioritize a link from another recipe site over, say, Grandma's crochet site. And that's not a bad, maybe the Grandma's crochet site is not a bad link, but nevertheless, it's not a quality or a quantitatively relevant link as, say, a link from another recipe site. We want to focus on that. We also want to generate content focused on the core audience so that we can attract new visitors. With recipe sites, that could be anything from meal plans to roundups to detailed ingredient guides to whatever you think your audience is going to be interested, that you also think might be able to resonate online with other maybe recipe lookers that would generate links in the short and long term. We also want to update older content whenever possible and make sure that it's the best it could be, because once we do that, we increase the likelihood that that content will be considered high quality and will generate increased links both in the short term and the long term. We also want to study our competitors. We want to make sure that we find out where they're getting their links from and go after those same links. So I know many of you on the call try to emulate other sites in your niche or have sites that you aspire to go after. Well, a good idea, a good way to do that would be to start doing some competitor backlink analysis on those sites and find what links they have that you do not have and see if we can fill in some of those gaps. Now, backlink analysis is a little tough because, of course, we don't have access to one of the biggest free versions of backlink data for that other competing site, which is their Search Console. But what you can do is use an SEMrush, you can use a Majestic, you can use a Moz. Maybe you could share, Ahrefs. Maybe you could share a subscription with someone else to run some link analysis and pull their link data and see if you can find some link opportunities that way. But we also want to be visible. We want to pull in links via podcasts. We want to pull in links by maybe offering scholarships or other community-based opportunities on your site that may allow you to stand out locally. Local links are a great way to both expand your brand and also generate some very inexpensive links that will help you long-term, because those local links especially are very usually editorially vouched for and given. Things like the Better Business Bureau, things like being a regular at a local farmer's market. Usually those all have sites, and when we can get on those sites, that will help our backlink profile in the interim. And then finally, we want to push our content out by social media. We want to generate viral inflection points on specific articles and podcasts. Maybe you have a recipe or maybe you have a resource that you know is just kick ass. We really want to push that out as much as possible. And maybe we do not have strong social accounts, but maybe we have friends who do. Get them involved. See if they can help you propel or retweet or reshare that content so we can get it out, because the wider audience we can get to review your content, the better chance we can generate links to that content. So all things to think about when you're looking to build up your own domain authority.
A couple things I want to dive into, Casey, on what you just mentioned, aside from the cute cat, is on the local aspect. Would local links still make sense for a brand that doesn't focus on a local audience? It has more of a national or even international audience. And you also said inexpensive. So is there generally a cost, or do you mean time-wise, or
That's a good question. It's a good question. When I say inexpensive, I mean time-related. Gotcha. Like, for example, one of the easiest ways for a food blogger to generate increased traffic and notoriety for their blog is to literally contact their local news and radio stations to see if they would like free cooking or recipe content. And in many cases, those sites will fall over themselves agreeing to that. We've had a lot of success here in San Diego. When I turn on the TV, it's amazing how many times I'll see a blogger that I've consulted with or who's locally based, who has a cookbook or something else where all they've done is contacted the local morning show, and managed to get some time to talk about the cookbook or provide a cooking demonstration, or maybe they were just providing some very specific information on a seasonal trend. Laura Bashir, we all know Laura. I think Laura is based here in San Diego. She had a couple years ago, she released a cookbook that was all about cookouts, family cookouts. And I turned on KUSI in the morning, and lo and behold, there's Laura doing a cooking demonstration on showing some of these more popular recipes for cookouts. And she did that by contacting the radio. She did that by contacting them and positioning her cookbook as an option that she knew the audience would be interested in. And that is something that a lot of bloggers struggle to do. They don't want to put themselves out there because they're either shy or they don't want to deal with the possible rejection. Trust me, I get it. I've audited everyone you can think of, and there's a percentage of bloggers out there that just do not even want to show their photo on their website. And unfortunately, those are the bloggers that do not tend to do as well long term. But you want to be as visible as you can, be as vocal as you can, and saying, hey, I'm a member of this community. I have content that I know the community would be interested in. It's not going to cost you anything. And then in return, you're going to generate very good goodwill, and you're also going to generate some links on those sites as well, which will help you.
Thank you, Casey. Andrew, looking at this from more of a resource perspective on, okay, let's actually task this out. How much effort should you put towards backlink building on a monthly basis? Say it in percentage terms, so we can actually like think about this out of all the, excuse me, cat, many tasks that need to get done, especially for optimizing your blog. How much effort should you put towards backlink building alone?
You guys know what answer is coming, right? It depends. It's really going to depend on your site and how much content you have, how many links you already have, what you're trying to do, where you're trying to compete. So there isn't like, I can't say like spend 37% of your week building backlinks. Like you can't really answer, you can't do that, right? But I want to illustrate, I think with two sort of stories of how I've been working on links. Because I think building backlinks, if you do it smartly, it's not just about getting a link, right? It's about building something else, and it reaps dividends for years. So when I started my food blog in 2010, I was brand new and didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I had this idea to do a challenge. And so I did what I call the October on Process Challenge, where I tried to get as many people as possible to eat no processed food. There are probably some of you on the call who participated, I hope. And what I ended up doing was I put this pledge page on my site, and I had this plea of like, let's stop eating processed food. And then I reached out to lots of other bloggers and said, hey, I'm doing this challenge. Would you like to participate? What I'm going to do is publish a guest post on my site every day for the month. Will you write a guest post? And I'll link back to your site. And then when we publish that, please do a teaser post on your site, sending people to the challenge, right? And so I got a lot of people involved in this. I don't know how well that would work in 2022. This was 12 years ago, and it was a slightly different environment, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Like it wasn't a super strategic backlink building plan, right? I was just excited doing this and building something really cool and building community. And it ended up getting a ton of links, and it got everybody's social media involved. And, my site still has backlinks from a lot of those posts. And, Eating Rules is sadly neglected right now because I'm spending all my time with NerdPress, but it still has a fair amount of traffic. It still ranks well. I need to do a little bit of work to it's starting to drop off, but I think the primary reason it's still getting any traffic at all is because it has a really strong backlink profile because of all of that. So there's that. The other example I want to give is actually what we're doing right now. The four of us are doing these webinars, right? And then the webinars are going on the Top Hat Rank website, and Arsen and Ashley are very strategically doing the Q&A, so it's all text on the page. So there's content on the page. It's not just a posted video, right? So all of that is very deliberate. It's useful and helpful for everybody, but it's also strategic. And what I've started doing at NerdPress is we've actually started building an SEO resources library, and Ashley just posted the link in. Thank you. Where we started collecting links to other sites that have good SEO content, because we have lots of clients who are asking us for SEO advice, and we kind of wanted to have a repository of all this information, right? Well, of course, in the various categories, we're linking to all the Top Hat Rank webinars. So we're NerdPress is linking to Top Hat Rank because it makes sense. It's providing value, and we're helping people get to the right content instead of just sifting through, all of the webinars in chronological order on their blog. They're looking at like the link building section, and they know which webinar to go to. So I think the big takeaway I want everybody to have on this is you have to get creative. With recipes, it's really challenging right now because there's so much, so much competition of so many sites. And so you do need to start branching out and thinking how can you get these links. It's not just about like slogging through to, spend your time building backlinks. It's about being strategic and smart about it and coming up with creative approaches.
Good answer.
Great answer.
Better than my first one, Arsen?
You did.
The first one was great too. I just had to Jewish mother it a little bit.
No, that was good. That was good.
Something, Andrew, that you mentioned that I want to expand on is you gave your example that was back in 2012,
2010. I did it for like 9 years, but so I did it every year, every October. Sorry, you had a question.
So you did it every year for 9 years. Is there such thing as a backlink going bad? Can you lose a link because too much time has passed?
Oh, sure. I mean, a lot of the sites that link to, a lot of people who did a guest post in 2011 or 2012, they might have taken their site offline by now.
Yeah. Or changed their URLs and forgot to put in those redirects, which we see all the time still.
Yeah. So, and that's part of why my traffic is starting to go down, because a lot of those links are kind of falling off naturally. There's nothing wrong with that, but,
well, Arsen and I have also been sending a ton of Japanese cat fancy links to your site for years. So that probably has something to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Casey, let's talk about a brand new site, literally starting from scratch, maybe just launched like a month ago. Where would you even begin to start beginning links for, or get backlinks for a brand new site?
I'm going to paste over. There's a significant amount of things that you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this over into the chat, and I'll have you repaste it over to everyone else there. See if we can see if it actually goes. Maybe not. If you don't see it, let me know.
I think Ashley's the only one who could actually message with everybody else in the chat.
Yeah, that's why I'm pasting it over here.
Once again, Arsen, Casey, and I
we have to be super nice to her.
Yeah. If you want your information transferred over, yes.
Right.
It's not, you can always drop it in the doc, or I can get it from you afterwards. Don't worry, everyone, all of the resources and the URLs that they normally would have pasted over, I'll make sure and collect them afterwards and put them in the recap blog post, so you'll still get links to everything.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's not pasting over. Good times. So when we're talking about a brand new site, the very first thing that we want to do is claim all the social profile and brand websites and immediately link out from those to your main website. So we want to immediately claim all of your social profiles. That is literally the very first thing you should do after you've launched your site, or in the time you've launched your site. We want to claim all our social profile and brand websites and immediately go into them and link back to our main website as soon as we can. We also want to focus on publishing at least 50 high quality articles or recipes, whatever we can get upline first, because we want to actually make sure that we have linkable targets that we can work with. Then we want to set up things like Google Alerts and Talk Walker alerts for our brand, our site name, and more to monitor for possible link opportunities. It's amazing how many established bloggers do not do this. I have an alert set up so that anytime someone mentions Casey Markey or MediaWise, I'm alerted so that I can possibly see, did they link to me? And if not, maybe I can drop them a quick note and ask them to link to me if that's appropriate. We'd also want to set up a Quora.com account. A Quora.com account is really interesting. It's free to do. Find your niche. There's a niche for everything, including food and drink, where you can answer questions to kind of build up your expertise, provide a way for you to get some other links to your website, and kind of start researching what's going on in your niche. We'd also, and I've mentioned this earlier, we want to start competitor research. Find 3 sites you wish to emulate and pull their backlink profiles. Take a look and see where they've linked, where they're linking from. Maybe you can go in and get some of these links yourself. Find 5 to 10 link targets that should link to you and start reaching out with contact emails. We can do, I know a lot of bloggers have started a podcast or submitted themselves to podcasts. As part of the audits I do, I provide a whole section on link building and provide some very quick and easy link targets that those bloggers can use to get the ball rolling at their end. And we can also start advertising offline. We can sponsor sports teams. We can do a bake sale. We can do local events or conferences. Anything that you can think of that will get your exposure or get your site out there, you should. It's funny because I used to work a lot with law firms, and you wouldn't believe how many sports teams we sponsored with law firms that resulted in a lot of links and goodwill with the community. So, little things like that. You can also expand your network by following and befriending bigger bloggers and getting them to propel your content. We've covered a lot of this stuff, and I'll have Ashley paste that in our previous link building webinar, where we talked about the concepts of broken link building. We talked about guest blogging. We talked about creating the infographics and other original image resources on your site to pull in links. We talked about testimonials. We talked about generating reviews on LinkedIn and Facebook. I think a lot of my personal success has been because I have generated a ridiculous amount of visible, reputable reviews on LinkedIn, Facebook, and other sites. I have 200 plus reviews on Facebook from clients who enjoyed their audit experience. And I think that really helps reinforce your expertise. And it also makes people understand, okay, this is something that, we have to invest in, or if I am going to invest in, I want to overcome some of the worries I had by looking at the returns or experience from previous people who are in the exact same position I was and maybe was hesitating as well. We also really want to build relationships by blog commenting. Now, the thing about blog commenting, which again is still very popular in the food and lifestyle niche, blog comments are no follow. It's fine. But blog comments are a good way for you to get on the radar of other bloggers, to form those relationships, to have, hey, this is something that I really enjoyed making. Oh, by the way, I've got something over here that you may be interested in. We can do some kind of a cooperative arrangement where, as we were discussing earlier, maybe we can have them guest blog on your site or vice versa. All that stuff still works. Okay. We just want it to be as natural as possible. What we don't want to do is have 7 bloggers working in concert, linking back and forth to each other in every post they're doing. And trust me, I still see that over and over again, because that kind of pattern is easy to suss out. It's something that Google can algorithmically detect and ignore at scale. So it's certainly not something I would waste a lot of your time. But we'll make sure that we have a full list of these possible opportunities in the transcript or something, and we'll get those to Ashley at the end of the call.
Yeah, definitely make sure those are linked. Ersin, say we're building backlinks for a site that is already established, that is getting great traffic, but needs to beat out maybe one of the top 1 or 2 competitors, and links is where it's at. So are there any strategies that maybe Casey didn't mention that you do for established sites?
Yeah. So a lot of times what we see with larger sites, or sites that have been around for a while and have been collecting a good amount of inbound links. And those are typically scattered all over the place, right? And when I get on these consultation calls, the first thing I say is, we build links with a purpose, right? You don't just want to build links just for the sake of building links or improving that domain authority. That really doesn't matter. You want to build links with a purpose, and the purpose, obviously, for bloggers and publishers, because of how you monetize, is traffic to the website. So building links towards posts, recipes on your site that have high demand. And typically what we do is we take a look at that backlink distribution, right? We take a look at the incoming links that are coming to your website from third-party sites. Where are they focused? Which pages on your site receive the most amount of links? What's the velocity of those links? Did they spike and then stop receiving links? Or is this a popular topic that's constantly receiving? So like all of that goes into figuring that out. At the end of the day, as more established sites should be building links towards content. So deep links, right? Links that are pointing not to just your homepage or about page, links that are pointing to specific posts on your site. And those links should be created, or if Google is listening, earned, right? Those links should be earned strategically to reinforce the topic that's being covered on the post. Remember, this is third-party validation, right? These backlinks are third-party validation signals, quote unquote, that you're getting a link from a site that says this page on this site is indeed a relevant source or a good source for the information that's being published there. So some of the tactics. So ego baiting has been one of the best techniques that we've used back in the day. And the way that works is you have to take a look at where you have equity, like where do you have power, right? So like, let's say Casey has Casey's awesome comic book store.com, right? And super popular site, but maybe he kind of sucks at social, right? And then I have like a really strong social presence, but like not doing so well with SEO, right? So I can reach out to Casey and say, hey, let's barter. I need you and you need me, right? So in my case, I want Casey to publish something on his site with a link pointing to me because that's where his power is, right? I'm trying to siphon that. And then in exchange, I can do something on my social to help promote Casey, right? And then the way that works is you want to make sure that you explain to Casey, or I would explain to Casey, hey, I'm really trying to promote this one post, right? Please reference it in whatever you do. Casey touched on pretty much everything. Collaboration, building relationships, that's the most important part of link building. Even us internally, when we do outreach for link, because the way we build links is through outreach. We build relationships with these bloggers, right? We're not just pitching, we're building relationships. When you start building relationships, really cool things happen. You can collaborate on certain pieces of content. You can reference each other in certain pieces of content. Getting on these podcasts, Casey touched on local. So much potential there. And I've seen it done properly. Create like a meal planning guide for moms with like multiple kids or something like that. Lunch, right? Lunches. Or lunches for kids who have gluten intolerance or whatever. Create a free resource, make it hyper local. Set up a virtual cooking class for moms and kids, right? Set it up. Do a press release, hit all the local publications. There's so many services out there, just Google them, that you can draft. They will draft a press release for you and distribute it to all of your local news outlets. You don't even have to do the legwork. Your job is to focus on creating the idea, being creative, building that relationship, then put in the effort into delegating the rest of that work so you're not driving yourself nuts doing outreach, responding to emails and all that. Going back to ego baiting, collaboration, interviews. Hey, can I interview you for my site? Right? Or ask somebody if there's an interest for them to be interviewed on your site, right? All kinds of different. Don't give up on Haro. I just recently saw Paul from Grilling Montana execute Haro, and it was just like he was sending us emails because he's a client of ours. He was sending us emails like, "Hey guys, like got a link from here, got a link," and it was just like almost 1 or 2 every week, but it was organized and executed properly, right? So collaborate, reach out to each other. Don't just do these roundups. It's the same link over and over. Get creative, right? That's my story.
When you're getting creative, it's very important to make sure there's no spam in that creativity. So Casey, Can you kind of establish what the fine line is between a good backlink and a spammy backlink, and how spammy backlinks can hurt your site?
Make sure I'm off mute here. Good. So Google's really clear that any links intended to manipulate page rank or a site's ranking in Google search results can be considered part of a link scheme and a violation of Google's webmaster guidelines, which is hilarious because basically to Google, any link building is bad. So this includes any behavior that manipulates links to your site or outgoing links from your site. So a spammy link to Google would really be any link that would be a possible link scheme, or would be any link that, again, is not something that is given editorially or something that is given naturally, which is interesting just the same. Now I'm going to go ahead and again, I'll have Ashley, you'll have to go in and paste in the link scheme guidelines since apparently our copy and paste is not working here. But when we're talking about spamming link practices, we're talking about, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, when you have a small group of bloggers who are intentionally linking back and forth over and over again to each other with the very specific reason that they're doing this for SEO purposes, not necessarily because there's a benefit for the user. I had a client a couple of years ago a bigger blogger who they just made it a point that at the end of every one of their posts, they had 3 links to these other 2 bloggers. And they tried to disguise it by saying these were related dishes, but in many cases it was a stretch. And the problem is when you're able to do something like that at scale, it leaves a pattern, and that pattern is easy to find and ignore or get penalized by Google. And in this case, the blogger did get penalized for an unnatural outbound linking scheme that we had to submit a reconsideration request for. So it's certainly something that Google is still looking at, although I'll be honest, the link spam penalties have gone down precipitously over the last 18 months. I've only seen 3 of them, whereas in the previous 18 months, I saw 33. So there's a noticeable increase with regards to what Google's concentrating on and what they're not concentrating on right now. Google is just really clear that they believe that all links should be giving naturally an editorial, and that you shouldn't really have to publicize that content to get those links, which is just complete and utter garbage and horseshit. That's just not how the world works. We want to make our sites as attractive as possible. That means that we want to be a good spokesperson for our sites. We want to go out and be a good cheerleader and say, hey, this is my content and I want you to link to it. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to have a contact list. We set up I personally done link building campaigns for Fortune 500 companies and the automotive shop in Ramona. It covers the gamut, and they all involve a targeted syndication list with targets that we go after, and we'll either submit them by email, or if it's local, we'll do in person or whatever. But it involves a lot of give and take. Paid links are, of course, still bad, but paid links still happen. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of the bigger bloggers have been doing paid links for years. This is not a secret. This is just something that they can afford to do. We can hire PR agencies. Some of the bigger bloggers have hired PR agencies. We've helped them do it. Or maybe you've gone with a reputable firm that we've recommended, and they've gone out and tried to work at increasing your link profile. But the best opportunities for you is if you're looking to get to that next level, hire help, hire a professional, hire a PR firm that can pitch you to the appropriate people, or could pitch you to, like the New York Times food and drink section or the LA Times. So we just had a representative from the LA Times with us just last month, who currently works for Google Trends now, and we've had some very interesting conversations with her. And that stuff happens especially at the bigger Tribune-owned newspapers in the United States, where they have whole sections devoted to finding links to input into their editorial side of the newspaper. And we just want to be one of those squeaky wheels that they can consider for those kind of placements. And that involves a lot of local outreach, especially for food bloggers, especially here in San Diego. I've helped bloggers put together syndication target lists of all the local radio and news stations, and then let them know, hey, this is my focus. I'm a gluten-free blogger. If you're going to do anything that's gluten-free related in the future, please consider reaching out to me for a quote or a cooking segment, especially if you have a deadline and need something last minute. And you'd be surprised at how effective that kind of outreach is.
One thing I'd like to clarify, because it was mentioned throughout several times on the webinar so far, and Andrew, maybe you can help us out with this one. Do links from social media sites actually count as backlinks? Are they?
Oh, sure, they count as backlinks. They just, in most cases, don't count as followed backlinks. Twitter actually just recently took off the no follow on all of their links, and it caused such an uproar that they literally reversed the trend in 10 days. And the reason that they reversed it is that there was a lot of fallout with regards to the link graph that it started to create. And you wouldn't believe at how much spam suddenly appeared on Twitter's site after they had publicized the removal of the no follow attribute site-wide. So that was something that they reverted. Social links still count because they're links, but they're not going to move the needle. Facebook has been no follow forever. Pinterest has been no follow forever, even though they experimented here and there about it. There's even the good thing about, the Pinterest being a public company in many cases is there's lots of interesting data to be gleaned from the shareholder notes. And one of them was their attempt internally, an internal discussion that happened in August of 2021, where they were talking about removing the no follow from all the sites, and had consultations with associates of ours who decided it probably was not a great idea. And so they did not do it. And the thing about social links is that social links allow your content to be exposed to a very large audience, which in turn can lead to your content being linked from those individuals and other sites who will follow it. So understand that social links are used for exposure. They're not necessarily a link building tool.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit, Arsen. Let's talk about roundups. How can you utilize roundup posts to actually gain new backlinks? Casey mentioned, and I think you even might have touched on roundups a little bit, but how can you use them these days to get more backlinks?
So I know there's like all kinds of Facebook groups that bloggers utilize to get themselves onto roundups, and they're like almost like a circular, like you link to me, I link to you kind of a thing, and that's great. It's not really going to be like the win-all link building strategy for you. A lot of times Google will most likely, and again, we're assuming, we don't know 100%, Google will most likely like disregard those or ignore those. Roundups are great, but again, it's a one specific type of content. And if your backlink profile consists of only that one type of content, that's not going to look very natural and organic, right? So you should definitely be splitting your efforts. I get that it's easier to do this, the link, to do link building through these groups and just like, oh yeah, I got a recipe, throw it in, right? And then I'll throw you in, right? And that's great, but it's not going to win the race for you. So you definitely want to diversify and create as much recumbency as possible within your footprint in order to show, well, not even to show Google, to make it look as clean and organic as possible. Again, going back to get yourself on podcasts, that's a different type of link, right? The local stuff is a different kind of link. A lot of what local websites will syndicate press releases might not be like the best type of a link, but at least it's mentions. Again, roundups are great. I don't see much. I haven't seen much in terms of like a lift in positions from just roundup link building. I think that's good for discovery. Google will crawl that page and say, oh, here's another point of entry for me to check out another website, right? And that kind of has this cascading effect. Google crawled this page, and maybe Google didn't find it before and now crawled it because of this backlink. So you have a byproduct of that link. But as far as like that authority transfer or the topical signal, I don't think you're going to get much of. Maybe for a newer blogger that you will see improvements, but if you have other links pointing to it, focusing on just this type of link building is not going to yield too strong of results.
Perfect, that makes sense. We have 17 questions in Q&A and only about 10 minutes left. So let's dive into Q&A because there are some fantastic questions in there. First one is from Tony. I post in roundup groups for backlinks, and I'm wondering how many times one other food blog can link back to me without sending a negative signal to Google. What happens if one other food blog has backlinked to me 3+ times?
Only one link counts.
Yeah, it's not a negative signal. Let's take that out of the connotation completely. Links are, it's not a negative signal that more than one roundup is linking to you. Far from it. It's just that if they're all linking to you to the same site with the same or similar anchor text, or maybe it's the same site linking many times over and over again, it's very possible that Google doesn't count all those links, even though we have no idea how many of those links they count. Yeah.
Right. We haven't so Casey, I remember, I'm sure you remember blog roll links from sidebars back in the day, right? Because like that was like, ooh, I'm going to get a link from every page on this website.
Yeah, 1,100 links.
Right.
Like that.
And that used to work. I used to skyrocket websites with that. And then Google's like, well, you can't have nice things anymore, right? So Google will see the other links, but we're assuming that only one. So it doesn't matter how many times. That's why usually when you look at like Ahrefs or any other tool or SEMrush, they show you amount of backlinks and amount of referring domains. And referring domains would be the more accurate number to look at, because that's how many sites are linking to you instead of how many pages, because one site can link multiple times.
Maybe a good way to put it would be like diminishing returns after the first link, right?
Well, I don't think it would be diminishing, right? Maybe from an effort and no outcome, right?
Right. And like if they're deep links to different things that are related, it may have some value.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. If I have a exceptional link from, say, the New York Times, and they're linking to 3 different articles on my site, I'm going to get value from all 3 of those links.
Right.
So it depends. It depends. Did we say that already today? There we go.
Right.
Just a couple times, not too much. I do want to echo, though, you guys have mentioned a lot of the SEO tools that you can see who's sending links to you and how many backlinks you have. Is this data inside of Google Analytics? So say a blogger doesn't have any SEO tool. How
in Search Console, right, Casey?
Well, in Search Console, yeah, absolutely. The Search Console data is free. The problem with any link tool, it doesn't matter, and I noticed that Amanda Mason has mentioned Key Search, which again, I love Key Search. But the problem with a backlink tool like Key Search, SEMrush, Ahrefs, Google Search Console, you're only seeing 20 to 30%, maybe a little bit more of your backlink profile at any one time. There is no way ever, doesn't exist for you to see your entire backlink profile.
And that's why mimicking your competitors' backlinks is also kind of like you're throwing things up against the wall and hoping that it sticks, because you're not getting the full picture of what's actually.
Yeah, it's impossible. It doesn't matter, and we have access to. We have access to some tools that we don't even advertise that are incredibly expensive and that we've been grandfathered in for years. And even with them, we're not able to see. I would say we'd be fortunate to see half of the backlinks,
because you're relying on these third-party tools' ability to crawl the web.
Yeah,
basically, they probably don't have enough resources to crawl the web the way Google crawls the web.
Absolutely.
So they're not collecting all of that.
It's never a complete picture. That's what we're saying here.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that, both of you. Next question from Nisha. Do you need links to the actual post, or is it enough for people to link to your homepage? And do Pinterest links count? Great question. Arsen, take it away.
So both are good, right? So there's, think of it this way. Your homepage is kind of like the landing page. You get links to your homepage. And then if your blog is structured properly, your homepage is kind of funneling all that authority to other pages on your site. But you also want direct links to specific content, because there's certain contextual signals that come from that, right? So not only the anchor text, the clickable part of the text we're assuming again, sends a contextual signal telling Google this post is going to be about what's on this anchor text. And also in certain patents, and again, because it's in a patent, we're not 100% that Google uses it, but in certain patents, we've seen mentions of co-citations or content that surrounds that link, right? That also provides a contextual signal. So both are important if you're going to funnel authority through like a buffer page. So like there used to be a technique we used to do back in a day where we would write a very interesting blog post or a piece of content or an infographic for a very boring website that typically would not gain links on its own because the topic was just like terrible, nobody cared about, like let's say appliance parts, right? But then we would create an infographic that'd be like top 3 appliances that break down by category across the US. And it would be like an infographic with maps. And that got a lot of links, backlinks to it, right? Because a lot of people were talking about it. And then we use that page to funnel that authority internally through internal links, right? Mm-hmm. It works a little bit here and there.
Which is still very important. Right. For those of you on the call, we cannot ever understate the value of internal linking. I visited with Nisha today, specifically. She's on the call today. Good to see you. And internal linking, as we discussed, is something that we definitely need to work on with your site. You have a full backlink. You have a full internal link analysis now showing everything on your site with the accompanying anchor text. And we just want to continue to focus on that. If we know we're trying to rank for Tahitian salad and I only got one internal link to a Tahitian salad, then we know that's probably not a very strong signal. And we want to increase those internal links whenever possible so that we can provide that as a strong signal that Google can look at. And
we should
make
have an
those
episode on just internal links. We should
make
have
those contextual.
There's so much value in that. Like some of the stuff we do on top hat rank side with internal links just like moves posts, especially for those pieces of content that are already closer to the top and you're like, I don't want to touch this post. It's almost there. I don't want to touch it. You can use secondary signals like backlinks and internal links to further focus that post towards a specific keyword.
Perfect. Okay, next question from Zenzi. I understand that there are penalties for link schemes now. Are there similar penalties for comment schemes where bloggers start a Facebook thread and all comment on each other's posts? Great question.
Well, again, that's Facebook specific. That's not really going to affect you with Google.
Right.
So no.
And comments on blogs are no follow, so it's not going to matter.
Right.
Good. And next question from Amanda. Casey, you didn't mention keysearch.co. They have a backlink checker and I use that for analysis. Is this still a reputable and reliable source that you would recommend?
Yeah, Keysearch is fine, but they're getting their information on a feed. They're probably just getting their information from Moz would be my guess. It's possible that they're pulling that link data from Search Console, but it's unlikely considering that API has completely different parameters. So it doesn't really matter what you use, just as we discussed earlier. There is never one link tool that's going to have a complete picture. We tend to, as Arson will tell you, when years ago when all we were doing was link auditing and formatting disavow files in the early days. By the way, we certainly
printing money.
Printing money, and you don't need to be worrying about disavow files these days. But in the good old days, when you had to, we had to routinely pull link files or link profiles from 5 or 6 different tools and filter those all out just to have a 50% view of what's going on with the site. And even then it was incomplete, but that's just how it works.
Next question by Kathleen. On Blogger Roundup request Facebook pages, is it detrimental to copy and paste my intro paragraph as the 1 to 2 sentence description, or does it need to be the original wording? Interesting question.
Andrew?
I would assume original wording is better. I mean, Google.
This is on a Facebook page. It's a Blogger Roundup request Facebook page. So
internally on Facebook.
Yeah. So honestly,
I think Casey, I think they're talking about a Facebook group that bloggers get together in order to form roundups that they publish on their site.
Yeah, I mean, I would do everything you can to make things original whenever possible. I mean, Google's looking at all of it, right? We don't know for sure what they're factoring in, but I can't imagine the same 2 sentences surrounding a link that appears on 20 different sites is going to look nearly as good as the link appearing with 20 different sentences, right?
There you go.
That's going to look.
There you go. And you're really missing out on an opportunity to diversify the topical signal that's being sent to your site. It might potentially look at syndication. You will never lose with original content.
We have time for just a couple more. The next one is from Cheryl. I get many people reaching out to me to post links, do an article, etc. I always pass because I'm afraid the source is not legit or it's spam, or it would be frowned upon by Google. Are there any rules of thumb to help us determine what we should and shouldn't stay away from? Great question, Cheryl. Arson, take it away.
Majority of those links. So look, I wouldn't spend too much time replying to people who are trying to get you to link to them, right? Most of the time it's marketers and SEO agencies who are just trying to build links for their clients. Definitely ignore and don't put too much effort into it. Building outbound links from your site that are not very helpful to the user and don't relate to the content in which the link is placed is just not going to be beneficial for you at all. So I would definitely not put any of your precious time that you should be spending on developing content into replying to these emails.
Andrew?
Does it add value for your readers? right? That's the most important question you have to ask. Also, I just want to give you a warning. If there's any financial relationship whatsoever, if they're going to pay you for that or give you free product or anything, you have to put no follow tags on any links. Can't stress that enough. So and it goes for affiliate links too. Most of you won't do that, but so, you know, if you aren't sure, if somebody, you know, somebody sends you, let's say, some great content, and they offer to pay you to post it, great. If you love the content, take their money. Just no follow all the links, right? Win-win. They're going to be pissed because they're going to want them to be follow tags. So make sure it's okay with them, or they're going to want their money back. But you might be able to make that work if it's a legit relationship in some way, right? But if I get all those for eating rules, I get multiple a day. I mark them all as spam.
Yeah, really good point. All right, we're going to wrap it up with one last question from Kathy. How do we find what the domain authority of our site or another site is? Domain authority, not number of backlinks or anything like that, but the DA.
Well, again, as we've discussed before, this is more of a comparison metric that you use for competitor research. I certainly would not lose any sleep over it, but the fastest way to find the domain authority of a site is just to download the Moz toolbar. You can download the Moz toolbar, and for free, it should be able to show you that metric live, or you can go over and use the free, you can use the open site explorer over at Moz, put a site in, and I believe that without having to sign up for an account, you should still be able to see the domain authority on most sites. So that's probably the simplest way for you to find that information.
But also why? Like why?
Again, ours is not to reason why. Ours is not to judge.
We're
If you
here to
really
answer
want to
questions.
find, if you want to find your domain authority, so be it. That's how you can do it.
Very, very well put. Awesome. Well, that wraps up today's episode on backlink building. Thank you everybody for joining us. And as always, thank you panelists for answering so many questions. Next month, we're going to have a special guest and we'll be talking about Pinterest Organic. So you'll definitely tune in. About a week from now, we'll send out an email to everyone who registered with a link to the recap blog post, as well as info for next month's webinar. But until then, have a great day, everyone, and take care.
Stay cool out there, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Bye.